All right, good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about rental properties, investment properties for our clients. We're going to talk a little bit about selling them and a little bit about buying them and the things that the hiccups we come across when we're buying and selling these properties. So have you guys, hi Shahid, good evening. How has anybody ever dealt with rental properties before? Do you have any of your own rental properties? Have you bought and sold any for your clients? No? Okay. Do you have any specific questions, or I'll just get started on one side? I think I'll start with the selling side, I think, because that's where I find we get the most complaints and stuff, legal complaints and whatnot, or where we get into the most trouble with our real estate, right? So I'm just going to share the screen here. Let me just go. Refresh. Okay. So selling traditional rental properties. So selling an unoccupied home is relatively cut and dry. List it, wait for the offers, or like now everything's right back into the craziness of offer dates and bid dates. I don't know if you guys have been working with your clients at all or even just looking online. Things are going like hotcakes again. We don't stay in buyers markets very long. So you'll find in your career, if you spend a long time in real estate, it'll turn to a buyer's market. You've got to go turn work with your buyers. Like I was pushing you guys there, the last like 8 months ago, saying, get our buyers out working with us, because that market doesn't last long at all. Hold on, I just got some more people coming in the room here. So with a tenant occupied property, it gets a little tricky. So if your client has an investment property and they want you to sell it and it's vacant, it's pretty cut and dry. You can approve the showings right away, but there's lots of rules and regulations around how we have to deal with tenants as the listing agent, and a lot of things that I find we forget, right? So the first thing that you have to do is you have to give your tenants written notice. Now, you're supposed to be knowledgeable helping your clients along with this process, even though it's not part of the things that we do for the landlord and tenant board on a regular basis. We deal with the real estate paperwork. We're still supposed to know what the procedures are. Okay. So for the longest time, they had the standard form of lease. They made it mandatory now. They've actually loaded it on our web forms for us to use, which I'll talk about it. It's in our kits there. Okay, so you have to give the tenants written notice. When can you give your tenants written notice? There's a year lease that they're bound to, okay? They require 60 days notice at the end of the term of their lease that you won't be renewing their lease, okay? And I'll show you several of the forms we can serve when we're notifying the tenant of that. You cannot break the term of a tenant's lease unless they agree to it, or unless they agree to it. Basically, they have to agree to it, or you might have to compensate them. Okay, like the balance of their term if the property is being sold. So that's another option. Okay, it gets a little difficult showing properties when you have tenants in the property as a listing agent, because you're going to have to deal with, normally you're dealing with the seller who has a vested interest in selling the property. They want the property to go for the highest amount. Tenants don't really care what the owner's getting for the property. So sometimes they can be a little difficult with showings, not keep the property nice, maybe not clean up for every showing. So you want to make sure you get in good, very good with the tenants, very sweet from the beginning, and just keep it very business and PC with them, right? So normally I always get their number. I have a quick conversation with them and I say, I'm going to be putting up the property. We're going to be giving you 24 hours notice for every showing, 24 hours written notice. So that's also the requirement from the landlord and tenant board. But it works both ways. Like a lot of us grumble, we say, oh my God, we really have to give 24 hours notice. Like showings might come last minute. But the thing is, it works both ways. Once you give them 24 hours written notice, if the tenant tries to be combative, you just say, look, I'm only required to give you 24 hours notice to view the property for these showings. That's the only requirement. And in all the leases, it always says there's a clause that says that the tenant will give, will accommodate these showings. They won't give trouble for these showings that are going to happen at the end of the term of their lease. So they're bound to that as well. So it works both ways. Now, I'm not super difficult. If a tenant's being nice and they can't accommodate a showing here and there, I'll try and rearrange it. But for the most part, I make them do those showings all the time, because every showing counts for your client, right? You want to get more people through the door to bring up the price of that property, right? So you have to give your tenants written notice at the end of the term, that 60-day notice. Remind them to remove their belongings by the last day. If they don't move out on the scheduled date, start the eviction process, okay? I have dealt with the landlord and tenant board a lot of times over the years, not only with real estate. I own a small property management company that I manage properties for my clients, right? And in doing this, I find that the earlier, the better. It's very hard to be the bad guy sometimes. Like if that tenant is a day late, say that the rent was due today, they didn't pay today, tomorrow morning I'm serving notice, okay? Because the processes take so long at the landlord and tenant board. The important thing with dealing with tenants is difficult tenants are going to be difficult to deal with, right? If I were to serve a notice the next day, for instance, if my client said to me, hey, you know, I have a problem, they're not paying the rent or whatnot, I'm going to serve that notice tomorrow morning. I basically just cut it down to business. I say, you know what? Even if you promise you're going to pay in a week, no problem. But, you know, it's just my duty. I have to serve you this day. Okay. Because you want to start that timer ticking. The landlord and tenant board does not move fast. Okay. Especially during COVID, especially after COVID now, it's even slower than it was before. Okay. So some landlords install an early termination clause in their lease. These clauses stipulate that the lease can be broken under certain circumstances, like lease terms not honored, major neglect of property, and landlord's needs or desires to sell. Okay. In Ontario, for the landlord and tenant board, these are all sort of true. You still have to serve the appropriate notices. Okay. So maybe I'll bring up some of the notices right now since we're talking about it. One of them that you can serve your client is the N11. Okay. So if my client has tenants, I'm going to agree. I would get them to sign this if they're leaving at the end of their term properly, or even if they're agreeing to break their term with me. Okay. So somehow we've had a discussion and we said, you know what? The owner of the property is selling. And they say, okay, the end of their term is say June 30th, and I'm letting them know 2 months ahead. So May 1st is when I'm letting them know. Okay. I'm going to say to them, oh, I'm so happy you agreed. That's great. We're not renewing the term. I want you to sign the N11. Okay. So the N11 is the tenant and the landlord agreeing on a date. Okay. So both tenant and landlord would sign. You see the tenant's information goes here. The landlord's information goes there. The address of the rental unit, the date that all parties have agreed to move out on. Okay. And they're both signing the bottom of this agreement. Okay. This is best case scenario. This is a really nice tenant. I know if they're not giving trouble to sign this, they probably have a mind that they will be leaving on the agreed upon date, and I'm not going to have a problem with the tenant. Now, I bring both forms because most tenants, if they're going to be at all difficult or if they're annoyed that they're getting kicked out, which happens a lot, especially right now, because the reason tenants are going to be quite difficult to deal with now, and I felt it was good to cover this topic, is because the rent is really high right now, right? The rents have gone up. I know that I rented Grange Way, which is at McCowan and Ellesmere. It's a repeat client of mine. I rented it in 2019 and their tenant just recently left. I rented it in 2019 for $1,900, I think it was. And I just rented it again for $2,800 for them. So that's a big jump. They were almost floored when they realized that in 4 years, they're getting that much more in rent, right? It's a reflection of the interest rates going up. Landlords have a lot more to cover. It's also a reflection of supply and demand because a lot of people who couldn't afford as the interest rates went up turned to renting. So the rental market has become really hot now. It's even a bidding war when you go to put in offers for rent right now. So you're going to find a lot of tenants that have maybe been there 4 or 5 years and they don't want to move because they know that what they're going to face when they look in the rental market now, they're going to face a lot higher rental price, right? Okay. 1 second, let me just let somebody in the room here. All right. So that's the N11. If they're giving difficulty, okay, and not necessarily difficulty, but maybe they're just hemming and hawing about the date, what you can do is once you have sold the property, okay, you can say, well, this only happens when you've sold the property. You can't do it beforehand and you can't really know the date. Okay. So you can say to the person who's purchasing the property that I cannot guarantee vacant possession. It's always hard to guarantee vacant possession because the tenant could be difficult in the end. Okay. So I try not to guarantee that on the listing side, right? But I'm going to serve them the N12 and I'll give you the copy of the N12 that I've served them on your behalf. Okay, so basically the N12, you can use it not only when you're selling the property, but we're focused on selling right now. You're just going to fill out the tenant's name and the landlord's name and the address of the rental unit. Now, the tricky thing with this is this can only be done at the end of the term. You still can't be breaking terms with tenants. Some tenants are unaware of that, though. You might get away with serving it, but if it goes to the landlord and tenant board, they're going to enforce that you didn't let them stay their term, their 1-year term. Okay. But you'll see down here, it's a little different because you're now going to say, I'm giving you notice, not that the landlord and tenant agree. I'm giving you notice because I want to end your tenancy. You put the date in there. So if your purchaser has put June 30th as the date, you're going to put June 30th here. And you're going to say that reason 2, I have signed an agreement of purchase and sale of the rental unit and the following person intends to move into the rental unit. So it's either the purchaser or the purchaser's family. Okay. You have to be really careful when you fill out these forms because notice they give you only certain very specific people that they will uphold to move into the property, okay? I actually had a client recently who told somebody that, you know, my sister-in-law is coming from another country, I forget from where, and she's going to move into this, so I need to kick you out, right? But they didn't serve this official form. Well, that tenant knew their rights and disputed it and said, sorry, you're not allowed. It's your sister-in-law. Right. So what I did is knowing the terms that are on here, I directed my client back and I said, you can just say, you know, well, my sister-in-law is obviously coming with my brother. My brother will be moving into the unit. It can only be your spouse, your child, your spouse's child, my spouse's parent, me. It has to be immediate family for the landlord and tenant board to hold it up. Okay. So that would be the N12. And then you see at the end of the N12, there's only the signature of the landlord. So this isn't something that the landlord and tenant have to agree on and sign the document together. This is only something that the landlord is serving now. Okay. So that's the difference between those two forms. Okay. So when people are asking you to guarantee vacant possession, I wouldn't necessarily hold your client to that with a clause in there. Now, it's always different. From the buying side, I would like to insist that the seller give me this kind of promise, right? But from the listing side, I'm trying to protect my client. On the listing side, I'd say I usually cross out that clause and I say, I can't guarantee vacant possession, but I can show you that I proactively, you know, given them notice. I've given them the N12 and here's a copy of it. Okay. Different ways that we can be protecting our clients. Okay. So we're going to go back to this. So we talked about waiting for the lease expiration. Okay. So the pros of this is you're honoring the lease you sign, earning rent while you wait, and making a clean break with fewer hard feelings. Most likely. So I would always tell my clients that this is like probably the easiest way to deal with our tenants. So if they said, I want to put my property up right now and the lease ends in a month, you know what I mean, or 2 months, I'll say, great, no problem. But that's going to coincide with a 30 or 60-day closing date. If it's 6 months from now, we're going to probably market the property more like the buyer has to assume that tenant now because we can't be breaking that lease, right? So we talked a little bit about paying your tenant to vacate. A lot of landlords don't like to hear this, but just imagine the market we're in now. Things are all of a sudden better. Prices are up again. Maybe our clients are going to make a lot more money than compensating their tenant a few months. It might be a suggestion or help them with the moving costs or the rent difference. Maybe, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you know, it's a $400 increase for you for rent. How about I pay that $400 extra for the next 3 months? It's a small price to pay when, you know, if you can encourage your clients to sell the property now because the prices are gone up again. Okay. Sell to your tenant. So this is always a good idea. If the tenants live there for a long time, I've sold to lots of tenants before because not always does the tenant nor the seller, the owner of the property, think about this, right? So you have a tenant, they've been there for 4 years, they absolutely adore the place. Go and have a conversation with the tenant and give them the opportunity first. This does 2 things. It might open up more sales for you, you know, so this is where you're going to be using your roster. They say, can I afford? I don't know. Let me put you in touch with one of my mortgage brokers, right? You can have a discussion about it that way. Create more business for you. But it also creates a good relationship. It doesn't end up being, I'm the big bad wolf coming to kick the tenant out. I'm offering you, I want to offer you to purchase it first, you know, so they kind of take that kindly if you're good to the tenants, right? Like I say, catch more flies with honey, right? So if you're nice to them, then they'll most likely be cooperative during your transaction while you're trying to do the showings and everything, right? We talked a little bit about selling with an active lease. You can do that, but the buyer is going to you're going to have to write clauses in your agreement of purchase and sale that say that they will be assuming the tenant. So make sure when you go for your listing appointment, you know the term of the lease. Even get a copy of the lease, because then a lot of other people are going to want to see it as proof. The purchaser is going to want to see the amount the tenant is paying monthly, when they're moving, you know, what are the terms in their lease, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So what other things do we have to do when we're listing the property? So there is, sorry, I'm just going to log into my Stratus here so I can show you guys. I put a kit in there for listing. Okay. We're going to deal with rental now on the list side, not just selling the rental property. We're going to deal with renting the investment property for our clients. So in the web forms, I don't know, you guys don't have your logins yet. We'll go through this a little bit. I'll show you. I know it's kind of foreign, but this is what it looks like when you first log in, right? We're going to go over how to create kits for different transactions. Just very quickly, if you're lost, I can show you again when we go to do it, because I know it's your first time looking in the system here, some of you. So web forms, if we go to web forms, it didn't click in properly. You guys online didn't tell me I have my camera off. You can't see me. I'm going to stop the share and come back into this document because I know sometimes I lose you guys online there with the share. Okay, so we're going to pretend we're creating a kit now to put something up for lease, because I'll show you what I did. I put kits together for the office so that when you go in, especially as a newer agent, or even sometimes you're just quick and you're rushing, you make sure that you have all the paperwork you need for that transaction, okay? So you access it here from the little house. Okay, and I'm just going to go add. Okay, and I'm just going to name this some fake address because right now I just want to show you the listing paperwork and how I've put in. I specifically want to go to the standard form of lease. So we'll just do 123 Main Street. Okay. And then you're going to click on the templates. So we're going to pretend we're doing freehold for lease listing. Okay. You can do condo as well. It's pretty similar, but I'm just going to go to freehold. And then I'm going to create the kit. Stratus doesn't work as fast as I'd like it to, so I've got to wait for it. Got to watch it. Please wait. Please wait. I will say 65,000 realtors, but you think they're all on at the same time, slowing the system down? We pay so much for this every year with our dues. Okay, so we're in the kit now. And it's going to load all the forms we need for this kit. So whenever you go and you use the kits, you can be confident that if you fill out all the forms here, that's what you need in order to list this property for lease. Okay, if you pick the lease, or for sale, if you pick the sale kit, or in the offer, you have your BRA and everything in there. But we'll go over it as we do more training individually, depending on what level you're working on, if you've ever been in the system or what.
Kristen,
Yes.
but as soon as we put the information on the house or whatever the property is,
Yeah.
the forms are like created automatically, or you have to track the forms.
So you have to enter the information. So there's two ways you can create a kit. I created a kit from a nothing right now. And so all these forms are going to be blank for me. Okay. There's going to be some things in there, like maybe the brokerage name, if I put it in, because obviously it's the same for everybody. But if you're creating an offer, there's a way you can push it off that MLS listing, and then it autofills a lot of stuff for you, like the address and the legal description and the lot front and stuff like that. But again, when I go over creating offers like that, even though it auto populates, we should still always be going and checking. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of information. Like, you have to remember one thing as newer agents, that when you're doing those forms, you're 100% liable for the content in them, right? So even if you get front desk to prepare an offer for you, you have to check that over, right? Because at the end of the day, you're liable for the information there. They won't get in trouble at the end of the day if there's a mistake. You will, because it's your license, right? They're not licensed. So Yeah, so you'll see when I go into it, it'll be pretty blank. So I'll click on the MLS data information form. This one has the most information it needs from you. It's the longest form to fill out. This is going to be blank because we didn't push it off of a MLS listing. But if I had, a lot of the information will be filled out on it, right? Of course, it's going to take a long time to load. Anybody have any questions online so far? You guys good? This doesn't want to load. Sometimes I get impatient. I'm going to click out. Let's click out, click back in. Yeah. It still wants me to wait. No, I'm not waiting. Live trading, got to move faster. Okay, I'm going to try to click back in. So a lot of times people don't realize that there's other information that has to go along when you're doing the listing. It's not just the real estate paperwork. Like I say, we do this because we have to be aware as real estate agents that there's certain requirements from the Landlord and Tenant Board. Okay, so the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board, one of the things they require is that we do a standard form of lease. Give me 1 minute. Just going to go back into that kit real quick. The standard form of lease is basically what the Ontario, the Landlord and Tenant Board consider a lease now, right? Any other lease you create is not gonna uphold if it contradicts what's in the standard form of lease. Okay, so we have to understand and we have to explain to our tenant, our clients, our landlord clients, that even though we're creating leases for them with all the crazy clauses in it, a lot of them you can't uphold at the Landlord and Tenant Board. Like for instance, smoking. Okay, smoking in the property is a big one. We always put no smoking in the property. These are the rules, right? A lot of times they won't reprimand them for smoking in the property because when you pay rent, they consider it your house. It's my house. So why do you tell me what to do in my house, right? The only way that the Landlord and Tenant Board upholds is if it's bothersome to other tenants. Like if there's a tenant in the basement and the upstairs tenants are always smoking or vice versa, and the smoke smell is affecting the other person's reasonable enjoyment of the property, then they'll reprimand them for it. Then they'll tell them, okay, you have to stop smoking. Or pets, same thing. They can't tell me I can't have a pet in my own house. I pay rent, it's my house, right? They'll uphold damages though, due to these things. So if you can prove that through smoking or through having a pet, there was major damage to the property, they'll uphold that your client has to remediate that and fix those problems, right? But we still put those clauses in to make our clients feel better, right? But you'll see the standard form of lease is pretty basic, right? You have the landlord's legal name that you're filling out. Then you're going to name the tenants, okay, in the property. And these are the tenants that are going to be on lease. This gets a little bit confusing. Who are the tenants going to be in the property? We always put the tenants that are going to be on lease, right? Because we have the rental application, which I'm going to show you next. And that's going to be all the occupants of the property. And people always say to me, like, why do I have to put the kids on there? You know, why, like, when I'm getting people to fill it out? Because for insurance purposes, your landlord needs to know who all the occupants of the building are, right? So if they say 5 people are living in the 3-bedroom unit and you go and God forbid there's a fire or something and there's 12 people living in there, whose fault is it? Does the landlord aware of that? Or is it the tenant? Because the insurance is going to want to know who to cover because that's a liability. That's not allowed. That's overcrowding, right? They consider that overcrowding. The fire department has so many people can live in, you know, certain size dwellings, right? So if you told your insurance company 12 people are living in that 3-bedroom, they'd probably go, not insuring you, not covering that, right? So when you have a rental property, you have to know who the occupants are in your property. So if you come across that question, you get difficult people like, why do I have to put the kids on there? Why do I have to, you know, say how many people are living there? No, I want to know everybody who lives in there for my insurance purposes, right?
Listen, what will happen, like, let's say, so we sign up with like a 5 people.
Yeah.
Those like, so their relatives like comes without like.
So God forbid there's something like a fire, okay? And I've had an incident like this before. I had a property up for rent in Bethany that actually caught on fire. The first thing that happens is you're the owner. You need to be fixed up quickly because this is not your fault. This is the tenant's fault. Something's happened in the property, right? So your insurance covers you. They'll come in, they'll clean up the property, they'll remediate it, they'll fix it. You're back to good now. your insurance company will now go after the tenant's insurance company. That's why we make sure that, which I was going to talk about in a little bit, but it's a good chance to talk about it. We want to make sure that all the tenants renting the property have their insurance. Okay. And a lot of tenants don't want to pay that insurance. And they say, I don't want to have that extra cost every month. You know, I don't care if you cover my contents. I'll even write in the agreement to lease that I don't care. You don't have to cover my stuff if my stuff gets ruined, right? It's not just stuff, it's liability. So if their guest comes and trips and falls on the crack of the sidewalk, right? Or if the tenant sets fire to the place, right? This is why they need insurance, because your insurance company is going to cover it now, fix up your property, and now they're going to go after the tenant's insurance, right? Because they don't want to have to be out that cost as your insurance company. Yeah, your house burned down, and yeah, you pay insurance, but it's not your fault, so it's not their fault. They don't want to be on the hook for it. So they'll definitely go after. So if you can prove, which is why we make them fill out all the occupants and say, declare all the occupants that are living here on the rental application, I'll show you in a second. Then, and they don't put that there's 8 people, you can say, I was completely unaware. They told me it was 2 adults and 2 kids. That's all I know, right? So you can prove it that way to your insurance company. Okay. So then they're going to put the rental unit address, pretty straightforward. The rental unit is in a condominium. Okay. So very important that they put this. Why do they put this? The landlord and tenant board wants to know that if your rental that you're dealing with as a listing is in a condo building, that you've provided the condo board rules and regulations. Okay. And this is for also insurance and purposes and for them not listening to the rules, because in a condo, it works a little bit different because the condo board will hold you liable for things that your tenants are doing. So if they're smoking in the property and they're interfering with others, if they're barbecuing on the balcony and they're not supposed to, you have to prove that you told them the rules and regulations. So every time you get a listing that's in a condo for lease, you want to ask your tenant, you want to ask your client, sorry, the landlord, can you give me the section of condo board rules and regulations? And you're going to provide that to the future tenant. Okay. Again, not a part of our real estate paperwork, but you have to be mindful that you're protecting your client at all costs, right? Because you're doing this on a daily basis. You're supposed to know, right? Then they ask for direct contact for the landlord. Okay. So you just put their, email, their address, whatever you want to put here, but however they want to be contacted directly by the tenant. Because once you rent it, we're hands-free from there, right? In the real estate world, right? It would either be property management or the landlord directly that would take care of the tenant after that. And here we talk about the term of the tenancy. So the tenancy starts on, let's just say it's starting on May 1st, okay? Usually we do a fixed term ending on, so if it's May 1st, it's going to end on the last day, April 2024, because we're doing a 1-year term, okay? So you can fill it out that way. Most people don't agree to a monthly tenancy. They want some sort of security, both from the landlord and the tenant side. Tenant doesn't want to move 50 times. Landlord doesn't want to have to keep on looking for tenants all the time or paying real estate agents to find tenants all the time. What about people asking for if a tenant comes and says, hi, I want to have a 5-year lease term? Okay. I'm going to probably say, just from my experience doing the property management and the real estate, I'm going to say no. Now, my client might say, that's fantastic. I'm going to have a tenant for 5 years. I'm not going to worry about it. It's going to be great. I always say, brand new tenant coming in, 1-year lease term. Renewal, I'll renew 3, 4, 5 years. And why? Because during that first year, your landlord is going to get an idea if they like this tenant, if the tenant pays on time, if they're taking good care of the property, stuff like that. Okay. Even further to that, just dealing with a real estate mind, I would always just say, keep on renewing the 1-year term, because you don't know if the market's gonna go crazy or not. So imagine that the interest rates go way up, the rent's not covering it, and now your landlord can't afford. Well, now they're in a 3-year term, they can't break that lease. Or imagine the market goes crazy and they can sell for, $500,000 more all of a sudden. Their hands are a little bit tied there with the tenant in it, right? Because they have that person in there for a 3-year term. So I always like short terms. Short terms, I always say, if you pay your rent on time, you're a good tenant. You can renew and renew over and over again, right? Okay, rent is to be paid on usually the first of each month, no problem. Parking, you can say if there's a charge for it or not here, okay? Rent is payable to, that would be your landlord name on there. The tenant cannot be required to pay post-dated checks or automatic payments. So again, another anomaly with the real estate board. I see 1,000 agreement to leases signed with the tenant promises to pay, 10 post-dated checks. You cannot enforce as a landlord, and you have to tell your landlord, like a lot of them want those checks, and you have to say you can't enforce it. The landlord and tenant board allows you to pay however you want, right? As long as you're paying rent on time. So even if I'm your tenant and I've given you 10 post-dated checks, and now I decide, no, I don't like it. Give me back my 6 checks. I'm going to pay you e-transfer now every month. You can't dispute that. As long as they're paying you, the tenant has a choice to pay however they want. Okay? Doesn't matter. So they're not going to uphold it. So here they'll say the first rental period will pay a partial rent of, there's no partial rent. If there is, say they want to move on the 15th, you might pay a per diem rate for those 15 days, right? You can add that in here. And then we come to the NSF charge. Everybody wants to put a crazy amount here. The maximum is $20, okay? $20 is the maximum you can charge them for your inconvenience, plus whatever your NSF is in your bank. And you have to be able to prove that. So if their check bounced and the bank charged you $45, $52.50, whatever, wherever you bank, whatever they're charging you in your account, it's that, and $20 is the max you can put on here. So I see a lot of things go through and I see $40, $75. I'm like, no. Never hold up in the landlord and tenant board. 20 is the max. Okay. And then we're going to talk about utilities. So what's included in the rent? So, okay, nope, gas is included, right? Neither is air conditioning. They're going to have to pay for that. Additional storage. Yep, there's more storage in a locker they can use in the condo building. It's pretty straightforward, right? And then here is the utilities. Who's paying the utilities? Again, pretty straightforward. Landlord, tenant, and then what the breakdown is. So say you have a tenant here who's in the upstairs and they're only paying 70% of the utilities. You could write in this spot and say the upstairs tenant agrees to pay 70% of all the utilities, right? You could put that note inside here. Whether or not you're giving a rent discount, a rent deposit is not required. So this is big too, because we can't take damage deposits anymore. We can't just take deposits anymore. The only ones we're allowed to take are first and last, and they're to be applied to first and last. Now, sometimes you have a kind of a weak tenant, okay? So sometimes these weak tenants with maybe a little bit less income, maybe not a good credit score, maybe they're, I don't know, retired or in disability or something that a landlord might consider a weak tenant. We as the agent for that tenant might offer more rent, okay? That just sort of makes them a little bit stronger. Maybe they offer to pay 6 months in advance, okay? You can do that, but you have to apply it to months rent. So you have to specifically put in the agreement to lease what that gets applied towards. So you have to say 6 months rent, first and last rent, and April, May, June, and July 2023. You have to put that in the agreement, because if they can spin it that you look like you were taking a damage deposit off of them, the landlord and tenant board will require you to return it to them, right? And your landlord will be out of that money. And then key deposits, usually you don't see it. I mean, I see some for residential. I think it's silly. It doesn't cost much to make a key. Condo buildings, definitely, this is a big thing. You want to make sure that they're not losing those $100, $200 fobs and garage remotes to get in on your landlord, right? So you take a key deposit. Or if maybe on a residential property, if they have some sort of fancy lock with a key that costs a lot, right? Fine. And then here we go, smoking rules, none or smoking rules. Again, you can say, smoke only outside, but I've seen the landlord and tenant board not hold up to it, right? Unless they did some serious damage. And then tenant insurance, we talked about that. Tenant insurance 100% of the time. Doesn't matter if they don't care about their contents. And then because we always do an agreement to lease, we say this tenancy agreement includes an attachment with additional terms that the landlord and tenant agreed to. Okay, so you can always attach the agreement and lease to that. It has a lot of clauses in it. Just be very careful, because it's a tricky, slippery slope. Sometimes if it totally contradicts something that we just covered in the standard form of lease, the landlord and tenant board won't uphold it. Okay. So there is that. I'm going to open up the rental application so you guys can take a quick peek at it. We'll go to web forms here again. Does anybody have any questions? How are you guys doing online there so far? Everybody's quiet. It's such a nice sunny day out. Every day gets better and better, and I'm getting very excited for summer. I hope you guys have all been looking. I don't know if some of you knew. I'm going to be sending it out again. Our picnic is July 29th, so we're going to have our fun picnic again. We had it last year. It was a lot of fun. We're doing the same location because it was a great location. We were right by the beach and everything, so it was good. Okay, I'm going to go back to this kit now. I'm going to show you the rental application. Oh, sorry, I'm going to pull it up here. So I'm looking in the listing kit. And the good thing about this rental application is they have an editable PDF that you can send everybody. So it doesn't take long for people to fill out. I don't know why people kick up such a fuss to fill out the rental application. But it's so important because there's so many different things on there that your client, your landlord would need to know. And you also need to do. So you should be checking references for your clients. Okay. So the main things I look at in the content of this rental application is we were talking about occupants. So you see they have specifically very different applicant 1 and applicant 2. Now what's that? These are the people whose references and employment I'm checking in order to approve them for my clients, okay? So I'm going to be checking to make sure that they have enough income coming in monthly to cover the rent, plus additional expenses such as utilities, plus if I feel they have enough to live the rest of the month, right? So if the rent's $2,400 and they're only making $3,000 a month, I probably deny the application because how are you paying rent and having $600 left for utilities and miscellaneous expenses, right? So you're going to judge and you're going to, kind of get a good feel for the application by doing these things. And these are the only 2 people that you're going to be checking the references for and the employment for and gathering. The other occupants are going to be here. Okay. So even if they're over 18, they're just the occupants. They're just declaring that they're the son, my brother, my mom's living with me, whatever, my cousin. But you need to know all the occupants who are going to be in the building for those insurance reasons, those insurance implications that we talked about. Okay. Do you have any pets? A lot of people lie, so you got to check it and see. Last 2 places of residence. So I rarely check this reference. You guys will check it. I'm going to tell you, you're rarely going to call a landlord and have them say anything bad about the tenant. Because in my experience, if they have a bad tenant, they're going to tell you it's good because they want to get rid of that tenant, right? But I mean, people ask for it. So you're welcome to call, see how, what they say about the tenant, what their sincerity is, right? My biggest thing is this employment, okay? A lot of fake letters go around there. So not only are you going to get the employment letter, you're going to either shoot an email to that HR department or to give a quick call to the person on the letter and check that employment for the person, right? Just to make sure that they're going to be paying the rent and that they've been there. They're not in like a trial period in their job. There's no foreseeable change in their employment in the near future. You can't confirm salary or anything with them. They won't give you that private information. But a lot of times the employment letters will say, right? But you can just, confirm with their supervisor saying, yes, they will be employed for the foreseeable future, right? Then we get down to this part. Some people fill it out, some people be iffy. I don't really force them to give them my banking information, but financial obligations, I'll give them a quick little checkup on, do you have a car payment? Do you have some sort of thing? Because again, if we talk about the person who's paying $2,400, who's getting paid $2,400 a month, right? And they're trying to pay, $1,000 rent and they have $1,000 car payment because they're driving a fancy car, it's going to be difficult for them to cover the rent. So you're just trying to sort of check, their debts, their income, and see if they're going to be covering the rent for your client. Your job at the end of the day is to get a safe client. The last thing that you want to do for your landlord is put a tenant in that property and have them call you 3 months later. Oh my God, they're not paying rent. You know what I mean? They're a horrible tenant. I insist a lot these days because it's so easy to do everything online. I do meet and greets before I have them sign the final copy of the lease. So the last 2 leases I did, both those landlords, I said, okay, you guys can go meet. You don't have to be present. I just want the landlord to meet because a lot of times, you can tell if I meet you and I can tell that you're going to be a lot of troublesome or it doesn't sit well with me, then I might not rent it to you at the end of the day as the landlord. So I do meet and greets. So not only am I vetting it, I also have that second layer of my landlord saying, yeah, no, I like the tenant. I think they're really nice. I think we're a good fit. Okay. So just different tips and tricks over the years, right? That help me put good tenants in properties. Knock on wood, I haven't had a lot of bad experiences putting tenants in properties. Okay. And then personal references. You can put personal references in here, but I've had a lot of people put their bestie, you know, or their brother. I don't really understand the point of the section why they put that in there. Like I say, I definitely hinge mainly on employment and meeting the person face to face, right? All right, so I'm gonna stop the share and come back because I just want to share another document quickly that it gets missed a lot. So, oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong one here. Go over it at this end. The landlord and tenant board requires also not only that we use the standard form of lease, that we provide all new tenants. So every lease you're signing, you should be giving this to the tenant, okay? And it just basically outlines the rights as the tenant and landlord at the landlord and tenant board. It's just like a brochure for them. It's almost like our working with a realtor document. We get everybody to sign, except they don't have to sign this, but you should be providing all the new tenants into any properties with this document. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. The last thing we can do is, aside, we talked a little bit about paying a little extra for rent. Sometimes we can see that to make a stronger kind of application for our tenants when we're trying to get them a property. The other thing you can do is a lease guarantor. So the last lease I just did, I put a guarantor on there. Really, really young couple, and they're just starting new jobs. They look like they're going to be good tenants, but you know, because they're so young and they're all new in their employment, we took a guarantor, so we took the father, right? So all I'm doing is the same thing. I'm just screening what I'm doing for that tenant, even though he's not physically living in the property. He's guaranteeing it, then he'll be on the lease, which means if this young couple doesn't pay the rent, I can chase the father as well because I've got his name on the lease as a guarantor. Okay, so we just checked his employment, you know, his credit score, any references he had, same sort of thing that's on the rental application. You want to gather that information for the lease guarantor. Okay, so this is just like a little form I created on my own in Word. I can share it with you guys if you ever need a guarantor application, but it's just because we don't have a guarantor application in our real estate board. I just created a quick form in Word, but it's the same things you're looking for in that rental application. All right, so that is mostly what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, about rental properties. Like I say, the biggest piece of advice I can say from running property management now for the last 10 years, and I say it's just very small, I just do it on my own, but I found there was a big need for it because our clients are really nervous to buy investment properties. A lot of them don't want to deal with tenants and chasing for rent and going to the landlord and tenant board. It's pretty daunting. You know, it could be a pretty scary task to go to the landlord and tenant board. It's like a mini court, right? But over the years, I find that the nicer you are to the tenants, the more cooperative they'll be. Right. So like I say, you know, offering them to purchase the property first, explaining to them, you know, the whole process, you know, I'll be giving you 24 hours notice, written notice every time there's a showing, and even accommodating with some of their requests when they can't do that showing here and there is good. Keeping in good with them, because your goal at the end of the day is to get as many people in that door. You got a show to sell, right? So you want to sell it for your client. You want to get as many butts in the door, so you sell that property for your client for as high as possible, right? So cooperative tenant is good. If you have a terrible uncooperative tenant and they're just not letting showings in and they're being a nightmare, and we've not only had that, we've been to doors where there've been tenants who are a nightmare for other listings. Sometimes it's better to suggest to that client that you take it off then until that tenant vacates. So if the end of their term is the end of June and I'm having a difficult time with that tenant, it's just better for the property, because if you only get 2 or 3 showings in and they're, you know, fighting all the other people coming to the door and they're refusing showings, you're not doing the best service for that client to sell that property. So I would tell them probably to wait till the end of June and then we'll relist the property once it's vacant, right? You know, show better with that difficult tenant. Everybody good online? So we have lots of fun stuff coming up before I end the video with you guys online there. I'm sure you're hearing me talk to everybody here about the picnic. Our picnic's July 29th. Which is going to be fun. And then Realtor Quest. If you guys haven't been to Realtor Quest, you have to go, okay? So it's just because we're part of the Toronto Real Estate Board, but it's one of the biggest conventions that happens for real estate. I think in Canada, definitely. But we're all going to go in a group on March 7th. No, sorry, March has already passed. May 17th. It's a Wednesday. We're all going to go and they usually give everybody a free lunch there. So you got to go and click on the link and register. Okay. You guys will see it. It's being paged up from the office and I'll be sending reminder emails. So when you see that come, click on the link, register, and we'll all leave from the office and we'll go in a group that day. We'll go have fun as an office. There'll be a bunch of other offices there in groups themselves. And like I say, they provide lunch. There'll be guest speakers. There'll be like booths we can go to, see all the new like techie stuff that is available to us. All the, anything goes there. So it's like, it's a fun event. Dear, please send me today's meeting link. Yes, absolutely, Bilkis. Not a problem. I will send it
Where
to
it
you.
will be? Where it will be? Like
It's at the convention center they say Toronto, but technically I think it's Etobicoke, but I think it's on Dixon Road. The address is
Oh.
also in the email I sent to the office, but I
Okay.
don't think you got it yet because you just joined. So I'm going to be sending the email again. Don't worry. It'll be like at least once a week. I'll be sending it leading up to the event. Just click on it and let me know that you registered. And then, we'll all be doing more details later on where we're meeting, how we're getting there, stuff like that. So everybody sign up and let's go. All right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Would you mind to email the first 4 pages you at the beginning of
Yeah,
the
no, I can totally
conversation?
email. Anything I showed you is available on the Landlord and Tenant Board website and on our web forms as well. So it's all available for you there, but I'll show you how to click and go to it. I can email it to you as well.
Thank you.
Usually I know you're newer here as well. Every time I do the training, I record and I always send the link out so you can watch back the YouTube video too. Once you click and subscribe to that channel, there's all the videos. So you can watch anything if you don't know how to do a CMA, if you don't know how to set up your prospects, if you don't know how to prepare for your listing appointment, I think there's over 100 videos there now on the YouTube channel, and it's just for our office. I send out the link every week. So you'll be getting the link for the video as well, Masood.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I didn't have access for that yet.
Yeah, I
So,
know because now
yeah.
you will because you're on my mailing list as of this
Yeah.
training. So when I send out the link for this training, you'll see it and then click on the link and subscribe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it'll notify you then when I put up new videos and stuff like that.
Okay, thanks.
No problem, no problem. All right, everybody have a good evening. It was nice seeing you all. And we'll do Tuesday morning training again, 10:30. All right, thank you.
Thank you.